solo trek to Everest Base Camp, a battle against the elements. The idea of trekking to Everest Base Camp had always been a dream, but doing it alone was a challenge I hadn't anticipated. As I stood at the trailhead in Lukla, the gateway to the Khumbu region, the enormity of the journey ahead began to sink in. Towering peaks loomed in the distance, their snow-capped summits piercing the sky. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of pine and the promise of adventure. But I knew this trek would be a battle, not just against the altitude, but against the elements themselves. The first few days were relatively easy, though the trail was steep and demanding. The path wound through lush forests and charming Sherpa villages, where prayer flags fluttered in the wind and the sound of distant yak bells echoed through the valleys. I made steady progress, my pack light on my shoulders and my spirits high. The mountains felt welcoming, their majesty a constant source of awe. But as I ascended higher, the landscape began to change. The greenery of the lower altitudes gave way to barren, rocky terrain. The air grew thinner, each breath becoming a conscious effort. The weather, once mild and pleasant, turned cold and unpredictable. I could feel the altitude taking its toll. Every step was slower, every incline more challenging. By the time I reached Namche Bazaar, the bustling hub of the region, the temperature had dropped significantly. The once blue skies were now a foreboding gray, and the wind howled through the narrow streets of the town. I rested for a day to acclimatize, but the sense of unease lingered. The locals spoke of an approaching storm, a reminder of how quickly conditions could change in the Himalayas. Determined to push on, I left Namche Bazaar early the next morning. The trail became steeper and more treacherous, with sheer drops on one side and towering cliffs on the other. As I trekked higher, the storm clouds gathered, dark and heavy with the threat of snow. The wind picked up, biting through my layers and chilling me to the bone. By the time I reached the small village of Tengboche, snow had begun to fall. It started as light flurries, but quickly turned into a full-blown blizzard. The trail was disappearing under a blanket of white, and visibility dropped to almost nothing. I knew I had to find shelter, but the village was eerily quiet, with most trekkers having hunkered down for the storm. I managed to find a small tea house, its windows frosted over and its interior dimly lit by a single, flickering bulb. The owner welcomed me in, offering a hot cup of tea and a place to stay. As I sat by the small wood-burning stove, I could hear the wind raging outside, the walls of the tea house trembling under its force. The storm lasted through the night, leaving everything outside buried in deep snow. The next morning, the storm had passed, but the trail ahead was treacherous. The snow was knee-deep in some places, and the path was barely visible. I considered turning back, but the thought of abandoning the trek was unbearable. I had come too far to quit now. So I strapped on my boots, tightened my pack, and set out into the cold, unforgiving landscape. The final days of the trek were a true test of endurance. The altitude made every step feel like a marathon, and the cold was relentless. My fingers and toes were numb, and my breath froze in the air before me. But the closer I got to base camp, the more determined I became. The peaks of Everest, Lhotse, and Nuptse loomed ever closer, their majestic heights a constant reminder of why I was there. When I finally reached Everest Base Camp, the sense of accomplishment was overwhelming. The camp itself was a desolate, windswept plateau of rock and ice, with the towering face of the Khumbu icefall rising before me. The air was thin, and the cold was bone-chilling, but none of that mattered. I had made it. Standing there, surrounded by the world's highest peaks, I felt a profound sense of connection to the mountain and to myself. The trek had been a battle against the elements, against the cold, the wind, the snow, but it had also been a battle within, pushing me to my limits and beyond. As I began the long descent back to Lukla, I knew that the memories of this solo trek would stay with me forever. The Himalayas had tested me in every way possible, but they had also given me something in return, a deep sense of resilience, a reminder of the strength we all carry within us when faced with the challenges of the natural world.